It's been a bit of a rough game week 15. Injuries are really starting to mount up now, and could a -8 be on the cards? All of this and more in my latest team selection video as we get ready for game week 16. Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey. Today we're going to be taking a look at my team selection ahead of game week 16 with a lot of injuries mounting up and a pretty rough game week 15 to contest with as well. So the game week finished off last night. 29 points for me was a pretty sizable red arrow, down from 275k down to just inside the top 400k now. So it was a pretty rough game week, only fielding 10 players as well. Areola didn't play, thanks to what was a fairly minor wrist injury, we think. But with no keeper cover on the bench, that meant playing with 10. Tsimikas also didn't get any minutes, which meant that Charlie Taylor came on for 1 point off my bench. But overall, it was pretty rough in total. And only three players, three players returned from my starting lineup. Darwin getting the assist coming off the bench, Saka and Mbeumo, but even Mbeumo went off injured as well. So overall, a pretty rough game week, 29 points, but what can we do to fix what is a pretty injury-ridden side at the moment, and obviously try to correct that red arrow? So let's take a look at some of the key issues facing not only mine, but maybe your teams ahead of game week 16 right now. So the first issue facing a lot of FPL managers this game week is Bryan Mbeumo, who has been quoted as being out for a number of weeks. We don't know the exact timeline yet, but I think it's fairly safe to say that we need to be getting rid of him this game week. Now, obviously the data was great, the fixtures coming up were looking good, but the fact that he had that blank in game week 18 means that even if he was out for only one, maybe 2 game weeks, he's still a hard sell, because once you take that Sheffield United game out, we've got Aston Villa, then the blank loading. I did mention him earlier on in my transfer tips video yesterday, so do go check that out as well. But for me personally, I think the best option in my team is going to be Cole Palmer. The next 4 fixtures are looking really good. We've also got the benefit of that Sheffield United home fixture next game week, and the underlying data is also still really decent as well. Even without penalties, the underlying data is still pretty decent, but it is also important to remember we think he's going to continue taking those penalties as well. So overall, I think he's a great transfer in. For me personally, one of the main reasons I want to be bringing him in is because of the value I can save. So I would actually get 1.6, 1.7 million back from moving Mbeumo to Cole Palmer. And because of all of the other issues in my side, it means that I can start using that money elsewhere to make upgrades and to hopefully right a few wrongs and a few injury doubts in my side moving forward. Cole Palmer's just for my side. A few of you will already have Palmer, so a few other options I did mention as differentials earlier on in the week include Bailey, Hwang Hee-chan and Garnacho, but I think if you don't already have Anthony Gordon, he also makes for a really good transfer in this week as well. And again, because you're downgrading in price, you can use that money elsewhere. For me, it's Cole Palmer, but do let me know in the comments below who you're looking at bringing in for Bryan Mbeumo, whether it's got Anthony Gordon or not as well would be really interesting to know. So the next major issue in my side isn't actually an injury at all. It's a player that has lost his place, and that is Matty Cash. So I think he'll still get all right minutes here and there moving forward, but obviously with the amount of other injuries cropping up in my side and with his value dropping really quickly, I think it's an issue that I can't put off any longer. I need to get rid of Matty Cash before he loses all of his value and I'm left with myself a little bit of an issue in my squad where he's draining value, he's not starting games, and it's quite hard to move him on for anyone of any relatively decent value. So the 2 players I'm looking at the moment, number 1 is obviously going to be Kieran Trippier. I'm always going to be interested in him. The fixtures coming up after game week 16 are still really, really good for Newcastle. It is important to note that they've looked pretty shaky away from home recently, so that Tottenham away fixture is far from ideal as a jumping on point. But Kieran Trippier's underlying data is still good, and obviously he's still starting games at the moment. I don't expect him to be getting rotated anytime soon, despite the fact we've had a lot of fixtures back to back to back. We thought that maybe he would get reduced minutes here and there. That doesn't really seem to be happening. I think for me, he is an opportunity that I could grasp. If I do downgrade Brian Mbeumo to Cole Palmer, it gives me enough money in the bank. I think it's 2.7 million overall to get up to Kieran Trippier from Matty Cash. I think the problem there for me is the amount of money that I want to have spare to make upgrades elsewhere. So in a couple of weeks, I want to be moving Darwin up to Ollie Watkins. I also want to be moving on my goalkeeper, maybe another defender. And I do want that little bit more money in the bank to be able to make those moves. With Kieran Trippier, if I made this move, I think I'd have 0.5 left in the bank afterwards, which would limit me, and it would already mean that I can't afford Ollie Watkins by game week 18 without making another downgrade elsewhere. So I think he's a player that I'm probably going to have to avoid for the time being, as frustrating as it is. And the player that I'm actually looking at bringing in instead is Pedro Porro. Now, Pedro Porro is a player that I've been taking a look at over recent weeks, even with Tottenham's defensive frailties recently. He's still been putting up pretty good numbers from an attacking point of view. And hopefully, now that Spurs are starting to get what resembles their first 11 back out week on week, and hopefully more of them will come back soon, Pedro Porro could be a really interesting differential to be targeting. The underlying attacking data is really, really strong, especially in recent game weeks, and he's popping up in really strong attacking positions now. The next fixture at home to Newcastle isn't ideal. We have discussed the fact that Newcastle aren't quite as good away from home, so maybe Spurs can benefit there. But then Nottingham Forest, followed by Everton at home in game week 18, could be a really good couple of fixtures for Spurs. Now, a lot is being said about their form at the moment, and I do completely understand that. They've not been looking great recently, but Porro has still been ticking along nicely, and I think not just for the next 4 game weeks, but also for the next stretch all the way up to, I think, game week 28-29, Spurs fixtures are really good, and he is getting 90 minutes week in, week out at the moment. So I think he's a player that I can trust, I can rely on, and the numbers are there to hopefully tick along with attacking data for the next few game weeks. So Pedro Porro is probably top of my wish list for Matty Cash at the moment. But again, let me know in the comments below who you're targeting if you're getting rid of Matty Cash this week. Another unforeseen issue that we have to contest with this week is Areola, who was out of game week 15 with what was a potentially minor wrist injury. I think the problem is that there's no guarantees that he'll be starting again in game week 16, with the deadline only tomorrow. It's a quick turnaround, so who knows whether or not he's actually going to be back in the starting lineup. And to be honest, do we even want him? With 1.75 XGC per 90 for West Ham in general so far this season, they've only kept 1 clean sheet after 15 game weeks, and a lot of managers were looking at getting rid of him anyway, so maybe this is the opportunity, even potentially for a hit, which I would be having to take to get rid of a goalkeeper this week. I think it still could be worthwhile to take a look at getting rid of Areola. I think the problem is, the main keeper that we're all looking at the moment is Martin Dubravka. He is up to 4 million now, so you are still saving a bit of money by buying him. But having played that Everton away fixture last night, he conceded 3.26 XGC in that match. Now, obviously, that's not a great start. I would expect that to improve. But the next fixture in particular, away at Spurs, who are free scoring, they are creating a lot of chances. I don't think that that is the best fixture to be hopping onto Martin Dubravka for. I think he still will be one of, if not the most popular goalkeeper transfer this game week when you consider the next 3 or 4 fixtures. But maybe there are other keepers that we need to be looking at, and maybe there's upside to chase elsewhere. Now, I've got 5 on the screen below. Onana has been surprisingly decent recently in terms of getting the points. I think he's the 3rd top scoring keeper so far in the game this season. I don't think the fixtures are really good enough for me to be considering him as an option per se, but he is still decent, and I think he's one that you could be considering. Sam Johnson as well. Unfortunately, Palace's fixtures are not looking very good. Up until this point, he's been really decent value for money, but I'd probably give him a swerve. Pickford and Raya are both options I'd consider as differential picks right now. Raya is a little bit more expensive. Pickford has looked really good recently, but I think the keeper I would probably highly recommend out of all of these right now would probably be Robert Sanchez. Now, I don't think he's of the highest quality as a goalkeeper. I think Chelsea will struggle to keep loads and loads of clean sheets, but their underlying data generally, up until this game week anyway, was looking pretty decent. And more importantly than anything else, their fixtures over the next 5 or 6 game weeks are absolutely fantastic. So Robert Sanchez would be, more than anything else, a fixtures play, and you'd hope that the fact that they've got good fixtures would outweigh the fact that Chelsea maybe recently haven't looked quite so sturdy at the back. I don't personally like Robert Sanchez as a goalkeeper that much, but I think the value and the fact that there aren't too many other goalkeepers out there at the moment that I really like the look of, especially in terms of value for money, he could be probably the pick at the moment if you need to get rid of Areola this game week. It is difficult. It is a bit of a minefield in goal at the moment. So do let me know in the comments below whether you're going for someone a bit safer for the next few game weeks because of the fixtures like Robert Sanchez, or you're looking at Martin Dubravka for that value and hoping that Newcastle get back to winning ways and keeping clean sheets over the next 4 or 5 games. So the final player we need to discuss today in terms of injury doubts is Heung-min Son. Now, he did come off the pitch last night a little bit early whilst Tottenham were losing against West Ham. Obviously, you want to be keeping your best players on the pitch for as long as possible. He also was videoed on the bench looking in pretty significant discomfort after being subbed off as well. So there are quite a few worries in the community at the moment as to whether Son is going to be fit and firing for game week 16. He did come out in the post-match press conferences and say, no, I'm okay, let's see. And I think that does give me a little bit more confidence that he's going to be okay. And I think historically, he has come off early and looked like he's been a player limping and maybe suffering from a little bit of an injury doubt in a few different game weeks this season, and yet has still played the following game week. The only thing that's making me worried is the fact that we've got such a tight turnover, such a quick turnaround in the next couple of days to get to game week 16, that he could be maybe too much of an injury doubt, and maybe he's just being overly optimistic based on this quote. I think for me, because I've got other issues elsewhere on my side, I'm probably just going to hold and hope he does start. And Spurs, realistically, with the amount of other injuries they've got, they probably do need to be starting Son if he's anywhere near fit. So I think he's probably a hold for me as of now, unless we get some sort of quote that really does rule him out of game week 16. If so, I'm probably looking at a -4, if not a -8 this game week to get rid of Son as well. So I'm really hoping he is fit, but time will tell, and we'll have to wait for a press conference from Postecoglou, who is usually fairly upfront with his injury news. So fingers crossed we get solid news on him. But until then, I think based on this quote, I'm probably just going to hold on to him and cross my fingers. So here is my team without any transfers made as it stands ahead of game week 16. As you can see, it's flag city at the moment. 4 players flagged, one of which is Bryan Mbeumo, who looks like not only a doubt, but a definite sell for this game week. So spoiler alert, I have already gotten rid of him for Cole Palmer as well. The other players that are risks at the moment include also Lascelles, who went off in the 89th, 90th minute with a little bit of a limp as well. So if you're in a position where you need to be starting him this game week and you're relying on him to start, then maybe that's another injury doubt that we need to be considering as well. Now, in my side in particular, those 4 injury doubts mean that I, at the very minimum, probably need to make 2 free transfers. I'm probably looking at Mbeumo out as one of them, as already discussed, and then probably Matty Cash is the next most important one that I need to sort out. And selling Matty Cash would mean that I can bring that player into my starting lineup, bench Lascelles, and then all of a sudden I've only got Areola and Son to worry about in terms of those flags. Now, elsewhere on the side, I'm not expecting many clean sheet points this week. Areola away at Fulham, even if he does play, Fulham are scoring a lot of goals. Saliba away at Villa. Villa are phenomenal at home, so I'm not expecting a clean sheet there. Crystal Palace, probably the best chance of one for Tsimikas. And then Lascelles, as I mentioned, probably not going to be in my starting 11. In the midfield, Salah is going to be my vice-captain this week as it stands, unless we get any sort of news that Haaland isn't starting the game. Salah is a decent option away at Crystal Palace. I don't think it's a bad captaincy shout, but I do prefer Haaland away to Luton. Even though Luton have looked pretty good at home, I think Haaland is just the standout captaincy shout, as long as we don't hear anything about him being rested for that game. Elsewhere, in terms of the players that aren't flagged, I'm probably going to be holding on to Darwin for one more game week before selling him for Ollie Watkins, maybe 1 or 2 game weeks, depending how injuries pop up in my side over the next 2 game weeks. Saka away at Villa, Gordon away at Tottenham. Overall, it's not looking fantastic in terms of the fixtures, but I think a lot of managers will be holding on to these types of players. And this game week 16 looks like a bit of a filler week in terms of those fixtures. I'm not expecting massive scores, but I think the field average is going to be a little bit lower as well. So let's take a look at the transfers loaded in to my side. Obviously, Mbeumo out is going to be one of them. Cash is probably going to be the other, but who am I looking at bringing in, particularly for Matty Cash? So with those 2 free transfers loaded, obviously Cole Palmer comes into the starting 11 against Everton away from home. The other player that I do want to be bringing in this game week is Pedro Porro, who fits in nicely into that back 3, and it means that Lascelles can drop to the bench for me. Now, Pedro Porro, as I discussed earlier on, at home to Newcastle is far from ideal, but I think the next 8 or 9 fixtures in combination are good enough for me to make that jump early. And it means that not only do I have 3 starting defenders that I can trust, but I think also, based on the fact that I don't really expect many defences to be keeping a clean sheet this week, it's an opportunity for me to jump on another player who I don't really expect much from necessarily this game week, but over the next few game weeks, I think he will be really good value for money before that price starts to rise. Elsewhere on the side, Areola is still a real issue for me. I might be getting rid of him as well. I want to wait for the press conference from David Moyes, if at all possible, to see whether or not we expect him to start in game week 16. But to be honest, I'm still pretty tempted, regardless of that news, to get rid of him, if not this week, next week as well. And I do want to be looking at which goalkeeper I'm going to be bringing in. So Dubravka is one, Robert Sanchez is the other. So again, let me know in the comments below which of those 2 you'd prefer. And it would, unfortunately for me, be for a hit as well, with those 2 free transfers already looking pretty likely to be locked in to Palmer and Porro. Do let me know in the comments below what you would do with this team. And obviously, as always, please let me know any questions you have ahead of the Game Week 16 deadline in the comments below as well. So there you have it. That's my team selection ahead of Game Week 16. It looks like a -4 might be on the cards if I make that keeper transfer, and potentially as much as a -8 if Heung-min Son is confirmed out as well. So do let me know in the comments, like I mentioned, if you've got any of your own questions or dilemmas ahead of the deadline, and I'll try and answer them all before we hit the Game Week 16 deadline. In the meantime, if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel, that would be greatly appreciated. It really does help me out, and good luck in Game Week 16. I'll see you on the other side as we start preparing for Game Week 17.